started. Okay, so thank you for coming to the open forum, the impromptu forum. So I really just want to kind of take a step back and talk about the parking lot that we are trying to get approval for from the Planning and Zoning Committee. So as I mentioned in the Pulse, on January 19th, we did go to the Planning and Zoning and ask them to rezone 10th and Pine, and they tabled that. So I've been trying to send you updates around what's going on with that. So the question has come up is, why do we need a parking lot? And I just want to talk a little bit about why we do need that parking lot. And then it kind of backs up to, why do we need a building project? And the reason we need a building project is because we need more physicians and providers here. We don't have space currently to house the physicians that we're currently trying to recruit. We have been busy over the last year and a half recruiting physicians, and we literally have no space in our clinic to put them. And so when we add to the clinic, we add the clinic building project, we will be losing 20 spaces. And when we lose those 20 spaces, and then you add that to the 20 spaces that we're utilizing at the church on a daily basis, and the 10 spaces that we're using in the daycare, we are in the hole quite a few parking spaces currently. So the parking lot becomes very important to the greater project of the building project. And again, our building project is really going to be focused on 3 areas. The clinic is the #1 priority for us. The therapy department is our #2 priority, and changing that front entrance, adding the canopy is and privatizing the registration area is our 3rd most important area. So the question becomes then, why do we need more physicians? So we know based on our market assessment that this community is growing. And when I say this community, I mean our county is growing. And so in order to meet the needs of our community, we have to have more physicians. And so the other thing I would mention is, we decided about a year and a half ago not to go live with an electronic health record on the clinic, within the clinic. And the reason we decided to do that is because when you go live with an electronic health record, anywhere really, you impact access for patients. And so with only having 3 physicians, we were very, and you know, not just the physicians, but the mid-levels, we would limit our access. And our communities have become very accustomed to being able to get in either same day or next day. And so we're really fortunate that we have the access that we do, but we also understand that the electronic health record is going to impact access. And so that is also part of the building project planning. We also, as a part of a longer term strategy around our physician recruitment, is we want to be a clinical rotation site for residents and for possibly medical students in the future. So the beefed up recruitment that we're currently doing right now is great, but the reality is we want a longer term strategy. Just like when we, about a year, maybe about a year and a half ago, we threw up 3 offices in the waiting room. That's kind of a short-term fix to a longer-term problem. And so we really put a lot of time and energy in planning this building, and we have not shared a lot of the details around the building project because there's a lot to be determined. So when we've been working with Scott from Accord Architecture, our planning has really just been around the project itself, the scope of the project, but not a lot of the details. So once we get the parking lot approved, hopefully, and then we'll start the building project itself at a little bit later date. You'll be seeing much more around the building project, but we really feel like the parking lot is critical for us to move forward with a larger building project. So without further ado, I will let Scott take over, and he can give you the details and the options that we have looked at in order to kind of come up with what we think is the best option going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. Scott Bloom. As Shelley mentioned, my name is Scott Bloom with Accord Architecture. And for the past year, we've been working on the master plan, which led us to the parking lot. And we've been going off of what we have to work with. You know, the hospital owns the property that's at 10th and Pine. They own, of course, a piece across Pine Street where you currently have 35 stalls. And then you have the actual hospital proper, the property that is where the actual hospital sits. We can't grow to the east. I'm sorry, we can't grow to the east or to the north because we have Pine Street on the north side, and we have a lot of earth. It's way down in comparison to the hospital, as you know, off of your ambulance garage. That really slopes down. So this property is much lower than the hospital property here. As I said, we have this property, which is the current parking lot, 35 stalls. And then as we grow in these yellow areas, which came out of the master plan, this is the rehab addition with the new front entry. And then this is the clinic, two-story clinic area with a long corridor that leads to the ER so that we can get patients inside instead of them walking out on the sidewalk and slipping and falling. Keeping the parking drive, or the ER drive that leads to the ambulance garage, keeping that where it is. But when we grow over here, when we grow here, we're taking away some of the parking, as you can see on the aerial photo from Google Earth here. We've got a helipad that's on the ground over here, and we're growing into that. And that helipad needs to be in a position where it is very safe for the pilot and the helicopter, as well as getting the patient in and out. So you're going to see it as we move on with this whole design, and we've just explored the parking here and in this B, C, D, and E location. And then we've also explored the helipad and where it would best go, and it'd be least disruptive. Okay? So allow me to move into, actually I'm going to go full screen here. Full screen mode. I'm going to go down 2 here, but this is at the option A location, which is over on 10th Street and Pine. Okay, north is always up on all these drawings. This is 40 new stalls, 41 I think it is actually. There would be a new sidewalk that would come across until it got nearly to that, it got past the Quonset hut, and then it would come across Pine Street where it would come over and then go again across Maple Lane, I believe it's called. And then it continues on. So if I back up one here, this is not showing up very well, I apologize. But the parking lot I was just talking about is right here. Comes across Pine Street, goes across Maple Lane, and then runs until it gets into the back of the hospital, the east side of the hospital where the employee entrance is. Okay? So this is for staff. This parking would be for staff. And you know, the obvious thing here is that you have to walk a little ways. But as we talked about in the last meeting, it sounds like you already have to walk quite a ways when you're leaving, when you're parking and you're coming around to the east side of the hospital in many conditions. So that's option A. Now, one of the things about option A that I want to also leave you with is that we're trying to be good neighbors. We want to buffer the edges with landscaping. You can see the different kinds of plants we're talking about, and it's discussion at this point. But because we don't have a lot of room on this side, we would be using shrubs, roughly speaking 4 to 5 feet in diameter and height. And then on the north side, we use a combination of trees. May end up using more coniferous trees that are not going to let your headlights go off onto the neighboring property. But that's kind of what it's about, is trying to soften the edge, beautify it, but at the same time knock down the headlights that are going to be shining off the property. And no doubt, there will be some. You can't make a solid hedge, and I think this is a better solution than fence in most regards. So that's something to know about option A. Then, as you saw, I'll go back really quickly up here. I'm going to talk next about option B, C, D, and E. And before I leave this, option B is an exploration of this property, which you own, plus potentially buying the brown tan house just to the east of it, okay? That gives you another 66 feet of property. As a hospital gets another 66 feet of property. Again, though, as I mentioned earlier, this earth is sloping down here. So it's important to know that because it plays a role in all of this, in the decisions we make. But if we do get that property, that's what option B is kind of exploring, and option C as well.
Scott?
Yeah.
Did you just mention the proposed price for the parking lot on that lot?
Oh, yes. On option A, the proposed price is $215,000. We get 41 new stalls for $215,000. That includes a sidewalk, some storm work, and of course the hospital already owns the property. We're not taking down any structures, so that's significant to know.
Does that include landscaping too?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we're allowed some landscaping costs in there, yes. Yep. So option B here is what I mentioned about getting the property that is this property line over to here. There's still a house right here, if you recall on the aerial photo there. But the tan house sits right here, the brown house sits right here. And we would be adding to the parking lot, but we would not just add to this parking lot as it currently sits. It's angled parking as you come in and you cycle back out on that parking lot, okay? You can't get through right in here. This is your route, or back and forth. So just adding 66 feet doesn't allow you to just add the parking that you'd want to add. You take away parking stalls on the north end so you can cycle through to it, and you would potentially have to reconfigure the way we'd stripe and do this paving. Plus, the earth is falling away here. So what we're suggesting is that we would take down, we would remove the current parking lot and build new. And we'd build it in a fashion that is all in alignment with each other. But we'd stop it short of this east property line so that we could slope the earth up and flatten the earth out here. So this would be fairly flat until it gets to this point where we would slope it down and be able to mow that. That'd be about a 3-to-1 slope, which is a mowable slope. It's about the extreme of the slope. But we think that is a good idea from the standpoint of just being nice to this neighbor, not having a wall there. But this option just explores that idea. And we get out of this 41 parking stalls. But we only have 30, we already have 35. So 6 parking stalls to do all of this. Let's just say I reconfigured it in some other way, which I'm sure I could. I'm sure I could get in maybe another 4 stalls in a different fashion here. 6 to 10 parking stalls added for the cost of that property, taking the house down, filling the earth here to try to level this out, and putting in new paving here. And that is about $430,000, if I recall right. Yes, $430,000 to do all that. And we only got 6 to 10 more parking stalls. Yes, sir.
Why couldn't you just build up that area to level out with the existing parking lot?
That's what we're doing.
Oh, I
We're
thought
building
you
this-
said taking that out.
We're building it out, but then we're sloping it back down. So we've got to bring in import fill to this side because it does drop away there. Right here is a retaining wall. This just keeps going down, down, down. There's a current retaining wall that's here that we would leave alone. So that drops about 2 feet or 2.5. And then we level it out, and then we drop down about another 5 feet over 25 feet, something like that, or 20 feet. So, you know, the other option is, you're going to see in the next option, is to build a retaining wall here. Let's be 6 feet tall or so, something like that, and pave right over to it. We could do that, but I'm trying to be sensitive to what the neighbor's experience is here when I'm doing this design work, okay? Nevertheless, you're not getting that much out of doing all this. So that's important to know. Option C is an exploration. Again, these are just, we're exploring this. We're trying to study what is the impact of getting this property and doing all this work, and what's the cost implication. In this case, we're looking at that same property, buying this property here, not buying the corner property, and we're placing a helicopter on a pad over here. We have a high wire to deal with. It's actually right here, just off the property. We've got some trees, and we have a street. So a helicopter's got to come in, it's got to land, it's got to take off. The FAA guidelines would like you to have a 1 to 8 slope, meaning you're coming in kind of gentle and you're leaving kind of gentle into the prevailing winds. Most of these sites, hospital sites, they're coming straight over, they're dropping down, they're rising back up, and they're going. That's the reality of it, but nevertheless, that doesn't mean that we're still not striving to try to meet the guidelines as best we can. And those high wires are something that we need to be thinking about. Furthermore, when we're landing a helicopter over here, we're bringing all that noise and wind and everything closer to the neighbors, right? So I think the worst part about this was that we land over here and we got to go back across the street, or we're actually coming from the hospital in many cases, across the street. So that's not the best. Yes?
Have you talked to the hospitals that have helicopters and see what they talk to them about different plans and see what they prefer?
Yeah. Well,
Or
I've talked to
is this
many
just-
pilots. This will be the 5th or 6th one of these that I've done at critical access hospitals. And so I've actually had a lot of conversations with Mercy North Iowa, Mayo pilots and such. The reality is they do come straight over, hover, and then come down. That's
Right.
usually what they do. But they want clearance. They do want clearance. It just kind of depends. If you have if you have someone that's been, for instance, in military, they don't really care. They can drop you in. They're proud to drop you in on a very small area. So it does depend on the pilot. And as I said, the FAA really wants you to have this big clear area. This whole guidelines that I actually have it on my computer, but that would take a field. You're out in the field, and yet you want to be fairly close to the hospital, so you're not taking your patients out in the elements very far, or bringing them in very far. So it's a tough spot. It can work, but we're reducing 18 parking stalls. We had 35 over here. Now we're down to 17. So this is a significant thing too. And we're placing the helicopter in a spot where it really isn't the best for patients. The cost of that is $450,000. Primarily, it's slight increase primarily because the construction of this helipad is a little different. You have thicker pad, you've got lights, you've got different things that you need to do with it. So we anticipate a few extra costs there. Option D, again on the same corner area here, is still, Pine Street's still here, and 8th Street. But now we're looking just pie in the sky, looking at what if we got the corner property, what would that do for us? We got the east property, and we got the corner property, and we already have this one. We'd have this contiguous site where we could put parking and or helipad. This drawing shows a helipad in it, and we try to keep the parking areas away from it a certain distance, but it's dominant in the middle because we placed it far enough from the road where somebody that's on the sidewalk wouldn't be affected by it too greatly. We're still trying to stay south of the High Line, which really I'm getting uncomfortably close there. So we're kind of in the middle of this right here, but yet we're still across the street. This gets us, if I recall, this was getting us 45 stalls, okay? Total of 45 stalls. We have 35, I've mentioned that many times. We have 35 currently. So we gained 10 stalls and we placed the helipad on the ground. But we're across the street, all those same things I was just mentioning. And the cost is rising with each of these. This cost is $687,000 as we estimated. You're buying this property, you're taking down a house, a garage. You're buying this property, taking down a house, repaving it all, putting helipad in the middle, doing some things like this work that'll come across here, trying to anticipate these costs into this, storm sewer, variety of things that'll be in that. So that's why it increases in cost. And then this last option is an exploration of what if Pine Street wasn't there? And this is something that actually the city's brought up to us. They've just said, consider this, think about it, and that's what we're doing. But what's important to know here is that we've got a few things to consider. We've got Pine Street's currently right here, and which allows us to get to the ambulance garage, we'd still need to get to the ambulance garage. We're not placing the ambulance garage someplace else. It's in a relative position to the ER, which is very good. So that's something you got to know, because we need to have still an aisle through here. So whether it's street or whether it's hospital driveway, we need to have an aisle. And I don't think it's enough to say, well, we'll come around this way and then we'll come back in like that. That would be a circuitous route that wouldn't be advisable. So that's something important to know. The other thing is, we don't really know the cost of this Pine Street. Will they just deed it over to us? Is there a purchase price? We don't really have that anticipated in the cost that I've put together today. We've made some assumptions about this property and this property based on something we heard about what this would cost. But I don't really know what to say about this. So for 850,000, we could do this work, plus whatever it costs us to get Pine Street. There's a sanitary sewer in the middle of Pine. We'd have to address that. The parking, you can see here it says 55 stalls. So we're at 35. We increased 20 stalls. We place a helipad on the ground. We don't have to go across the street anymore. So we do have it in a position that you're coming in and getting into the building fairly quick. But there's not a lot of yield for parking. And one thing you need to know is, as Shelley was pointing out, if we're reducing 40 to 50 stalls, or if we're short 40 to 50, if you imagine, we need to grow by that much. So this wouldn't be in lieu of the A option, the one that's down at the corner. This would be something that you do along with something that would be a parking spot down there.
Are we gonna place parking, going back to the first slide, it showed where the building was gonna come out to the helipad and encroach on that a little bit, the new addition part? Are we gonna
Yes.
place parking in that area also?
Yes, yes. And that's considered in the reduction of 20 stalls. We tried to gather some back. We reconfigured the layout on the west side, but we were still short about 20. Yeah. So there was a question in the last meeting. Someone said, well, could you do a few things to improve the layout on the west side to gain more parking stalls? I think it's safe to say maybe you could go up 3 or 4 stalls, and maybe try to work on the corners a little bit better, make things a little tighter, but it's not going to be profound. It's not going to be a lot. It's not going to be a lot of stalls. And we're down 20, so maybe I could get that number to down 17, but we're talking about 30 years. We're talking about a master plan that's looking at hospital functioning for a long time. So we have to be careful about what we do. So this is significant cost and a lot of uncertainty. It's based on getting this property, closing the street, getting the city to do that. Yes, Sam?
So you have the helipad across the street, which is no longer a street in this. How do you get into the ER?
So we're constructing a new addition on the west side, and as part of that, we would be creating an entrance right here, where we were creating an entrance for pedestrians to come in. We would reconfigure that entrance so that we would come in there and go down this hallway and into the ER. So we're in the inside where we're not slipping and falling. We're in a conditioned environment, safer for the patient.
Is that through the clinic then still?
It's at the north side of the clinic, so it's not through the clinic. We would actually build a hallway on the north side of your current clinic. We have a little bit of space to work with there between your current drive that goes to the ambulance garage and your north face of your clinic. So
Eliminating the sidewalk that is there.
that's right. We're essentially building a hallway where that sidewalk is.
But if you're coming across Pine, there's the obvious grade there.
Yes.
How would that be addressed?
So in this design, part of the quantification of the cost was to say we're going to have to bring in a lot of earth.
Okay.
We're going to try to level this out quite a bit. In all of these that I've shown you here, we're anticipating some amount of leveling. And this cross-hatched area right here is where the earth comes back down to where it is currently. So we're trying to mow this ground that's here, level this out, crest it, kind of, if you will, to make this property much more in the same elevation as this.
Okay.
Super important, because you don't want people going up and down stairs, you don't want them slipping and falling. This really needs to be done as part of that. So there's actually a good chunk of money allocated for bringing in earth, compacting it and all that. Yeah. So the study results really, we can get, just as a quick summary, we can get 41 parking stalls for $215,000 on property we already own if we can get the city and the neighbors to accept this.
So what's to say the city will refuse to zone those areas as parking too?
Well,
That's a possibility?
it's already professional office zone. I'm going to go back up. So
I mean,
this
if
big
they're
rectangle right
hesitating on
here,
this,
It's already done.
this big rectangle right here is
it's
professional
already
office zone.
designated as it can be
And
parking.
I can already park there if I want, which is why we're able to park here. So anywhere in here, I could build a parking lot without having to have the city do any kind of rezoning.
Oh, even if you purchase a home?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's that big yellow box, but unfortunately, it doesn't go all the way to here.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, we want to be good neighbors. Ultimately, Shelley and the staff have done a great job in trying to reach out to the neighbors and say, we want to be good neighbors, we want to work with you on this. We're going to try to buffer the perimeter, we're going to try to do what we can to make the least impact we can to you. But at the same time, we've got these challenges. We've got to grow the hospital. We're reducing our parking as we grow. And even if you didn't grow the hospital, I think you still have challenges from a parking standpoint. The longevity of an arrangement between you, the hospital, and the church, or the hospital and the daycare is, you know, who knows? It's not a long-term agreement.
So we're looking at multiple, A is kind of a goal for sure, and then these are possibilities as well?
Well, to summarize, A is this is what we'd like to do.
Mm-hmm.
The board saw this presentation, the board agrees. Am I safe to say, Shelley, that A is what we'd like to do if the neighbors in the city will allow us to do it? If not, then we are faced with those things that I was talking about and these other options. So it's really kind of A, and we wouldn't do any of these. That's, I think, that
So
may be
if
the best
you
answer
do
to your
A,
question.
where does the helipad go?
Helipad is going on the roof.
Extend
Maybe I didn't mention that to you.
it out in the
Okay.
clinic where it stands right now, right?
So the helipad you can see right there on the ground in this Google aerial photo. It's on the ground there. We'd be landing right on the roof, getting into an elevator where we'd go down and get into that hallway and go right into the ER. Beauty of that is, if I'm landing on the roof, I've got no obstructions. I've got no wires, I've got no trees in the way. I'm landing on the roof. And I'm getting right into the building. I'm not going across the street. I'm actually on a elevated pad that has snow melt system that I'm able to get right in or go right out and be in the building in a safe environment. So it's a very good option. There's expense to it.
Would that have a windbreak up there? I mean, you get some pretty cold northwest wind.
No, it wouldn't have a windbreak. There is as part of the requirements to do this helipad, we'd be working with a firm out of New Jersey for this. They did the one down in Covenant Hospital in Waterloo, but it would be some netting and some screening on the edges of the elevated pad, so that any debris is not kind of picked up or picked up off of the helipad and set down below or anything. You know, there's kinetic energy from landing on the roof, and you know the movement that happens there. There's wind that occurs. It's a big fan up there, so there's wind that's going to be creating some suction on the edges. Our windows would have to be designed as such, but your windows actually on your west side of your clinic have to be designed that way, because look how close the clinic currently is to the helipad there. So, quite frankly, it's actually good for the neighborhood because it's up high, and most of that sound and most of that wind is up high, not down at the ground level, as in comparison to these here, which no doubt these neighbors will likely say something about or potentially object to the fact that we're looking at a helipad over here.
Is it more cost effective to build on top versus
No,
these
so
other options?
So all those options, I talked about 215,000, and then I kind of went from 430 to 450 to 687 to 850. All of those are pretty expensive, but placing it on the roof is about $990,000.